You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker. This is episode 84 and I'm patching this in after the fact, this first little section here, and I'll explain why. Lots of times we are giving eulogies in our show. We oftentimes do them at the end when we're signing off. We also record these episodes ahead of time in many cases. Sometimes they're time-sensitive episodes and we do them shortly after an event or shortly after an interview because our guest wants us to get information out quickly. Other times they're episodes that we record and then we can schedule them for release later, and that's the case with episode 84. Unfortunately, again, in the meantime, some stuff has happened that we felt compelled to mention. One is the very recent passing of our dear friend, John Graham. John was a knife maker and designer, very prolific guy, designed stuff for CRKT, and a friend of mine and a friend of ours. He was a friend to many and also a mentor to many. So great loss in the community with John's passing. Our condolences to Brenda, to Keelan, and to Taylor and all of John's family. We also, a little while back here, lost a very talented young designer named Elijah Isham. Elijah was also a designer, a very prolific designer with lots of different companies and projects. He also recently passed. And then in this episode, we're going to talk to you about history. And sometimes we do these history episodes and they involve folks that are basically living legends. People like, in this case, Joe Cordova. Regular listeners to the show will recall Michael talking about Joe's unfortunate passing in our last mini-sode about TKI 2022. Unfortunately, Joe Cordova passed since we recorded this episode. Sorry to start the episode with a little bit of sadness here, but we felt like we needed to mention these and wanted to set the tone since we actually talk about Joe in this episode. Rest in peace, gentlemen. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker. We have some cool history coming for you on this one. A little twist on our history episodes the way we've done them in the past. We'll get to that in just a minute and explain exactly what we're going to talk about today. We have our usual crew here, so it's myself, Mr. Michael Birch.
I'm here.
We have Mr. Sean Kendrick.
Hey.
And we have Mr. Tom Crine.
Hello, everyone.
We have to first thank our patrons. We have some excellent partners with us, is the way I kind of think of them, on Patreon. Patreon is a website where listeners and supporters can go and pledge their support in the form of a monthly contribution, donation, payment, whatever you want to call it. So there's some folks who kick us a few bucks every month to help support the show. That's a huge piece of what keeps us moving and is able to support all the stuff that happens behind the scenes on Mark of the Maker, moving microphones around the country and all kinds of crazy stuff. So big high five to all of our patrons. We really appreciate you. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, you can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com. And just search Mark of the Maker and you can find us there. And there's a couple different levels, and we have some things that we do with our higher contributing folks that are kind of fun. And I got an episode coming up that I think we're going to engage our collaborator level people a little bit in some Q&A submission with a future guest. So that'll be fun. So thanks again to all of our patrons. We really appreciate you.
Thanks all. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, folks.
And
then, Michael, you going to thank a friend of ours?
Yeah, our good friend George Palagonia at amxinc.com. He's got all your titanium, your exotics and stuff. He's been good enough to support the podcast, and we want you to support him. You know, he's where we get all our stuff from, and you should too. He's got all the good stuff over there.
George at American Metal Exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Sean, where can they find it again?
That's amxinc.com. That's amxinc.com.
Okay, thanks, George. Thanks for your help. We really appreciate you, bud. Okay, so this is kind of
I've been trying to come up with a jingle but nothing fucking rhymes with exchange.
You need to get Marshall Mathers involved. That dude seems to be able to make anything rhyme. It goes into the enunciation. Yeah, break it up into exchange, and then you can just come up with something that rhymes with change. Exactly.
He puts the tit in titanium.
That works.
That'd be very accurate. Okay. Yeah, we'll work on it, George. We're working on a jingle. Sean's got the lead on the jingle.
I want something like by Menon, that really sticks with me.
Extra jingly. I got a friend that does jingles for ads and stuff. I'll have to ask him, see if he's willing to do a little pro bono work, a little pro Mark of the Maker work. Okay, so Michael was our lead on this episode, and this one's about some history stuff, but maybe in a little different way. Michael, you want to explain what we're going to do today?
This is more of a appetizer episode, not a full-on essay and long, drawn-out stuff, but there's a ton of makers out there they've done important work. They're a big piece of knife-making history, in our minds and eyes, and I think they need to be recognized and talked about. And some of these, there's just not a ton of information about them, as you'll probably learn with this could be short episode we're about to do. But these are guys and gals that have made some fantastic pieces, but they don't have books written about them. Unfortunately, they don't have long pieces, out there about them. But you guys, and some of these you guys have probably heard about, and some maybe you haven't. So
yeah,
hang out and maybe learn a little, or teach us if you know more about it than we know.
Man, ain't that the case? I would love to hear from some listeners about stuff that, we're going to talk about some four makers, and I'm sure there's a lot more information out there, or people that actually had direct exposure to some of these folks. We'd love to hear some stories.
Somebody will have some bit of information that would be fantastic to add to the tree, as we like to talk about.
Yeah. So history small plates, history tapas.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way we did this was that we each picked a maker where there's not a ton of info. I think in at least 3 of these cases, we've mentioned these makers previously, but not dug into real deep detail, right? One of them I think we haven't talked about before at all.
Yeah, I know we mentioned my pick on I think it was episode 3, the episode where I introduced myself. I know I mentioned him there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for guys, gals out there, we talked about this one. We didn't try to surprise each other like we usually do, because we wanted to ensure that we weren't overlapping, or, had one that we thought we could do more on and actually see if we can help each other out with them. So we know each other's picks this go around.
Yep.
We weren't trying to surprise, even though that is fun.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to walk through these, and we're all kind of pitch in, and we'll see how long this one goes. Some of these there's a little bit info, and some of them there's not. So some of them are more of a struggle than others for sure. Okay, I'll start. And my maker that I picked for this time is Frank Richtig. Frank Joseph Richtig, or as sometimes he marked his knives, F.J. Richtig. And we've talked about Richtig a couple times on the show, right? I think Tom may have mentioned when you bought a Richtig, right, Tom?
Yeah, I did, in New York.
Yeah. So we talked about Richtig then. We talked about Richtig a little bit when Laren was on with us, and he wrote a real nice article, Laren Thomas, on his knifesteelnerds.com website. I did a little bit of digging back in some older magazines. There are articles on Richtig in Knives 84 and Knives 88, the Knives Annuals books for those years. Clay from Knife World magazine set us up with access to their archive, which has been really fantastic. And so I dug deep in there and found some articles in Knife World magazine and was able to use those as reference as well. So pretty cool. Interesting guy, Frank Richtig. So let's start talking about him. Richtig is from Clarkson, Nebraska. He was born in 1887. And he passed away in 1977. So he lived 90 years. And his time frame for knives was 1925, more or less up until the time that he died. So he had a very long career, right? What is that, 52 years? That's a long-ass time of making knives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'll get to the story around it in a little bit here, but one of the things you'll remember about Richtig, or you may know, a lot of our listeners will know that have been around for a while, is Richtig was kind of famous for being in a little Ripley's Believe It or Not clipping that they published at a bunch of different points over the years. And so that was kind of the thing that he was most known for and sort of set off his career, really, where he kind of really took off as a maker. He got huge visibility out of that. But there's a story that goes with that I'll get to in a little bit. So a lot of the references that I'm going to go through are from these Knife World articles. The two articles are from B.R. Hughes, who wrote a nice article in May of 1988 issue of Knife World magazine. And then there was a gentleman, I'm going to get his last name wrong, Frank Traska, I think might be how you pronounce it, Trzaska, in October of 2014 about Richtig military models, which I didn't really have a lot of knowledge around, so that was a very interesting one to read. Some other biblio stuff, there's a WordPress site out there about Clarkson, Nebraska history, and there's a very cool write-up on there, and I'll include some info about that. And then, like I said, Laren Thomas's KnifeSteelNerds.com article on Richtig heat treat and some of the demystifying of kind of the stuff behind what Richtig did and kind of the things that he was known for. So, Richtig, born in 1887 in this Clarkson, Nebraska area. He was one of 10 children. As you might guess, in Nebraska, he was part of a farming family and grew to have a love of mechanical things and figuring out how things are made, which is kind of a common theme, right? In some of our interviews with knife makers, I certainly was that guy, someone who was trying to figure out how stuff worked. How many interviews have we done where a knife maker says, "Oh yeah, when I was growing up, I took everything apart that I could find and sometimes put it back together." So Richtig was definitely that guy. He worked as a blacksmith apprentice starting when he was 19 years old in 1906. And so he did that for a couple of years. And then he joined into a partnership with a guy doing blacksmithing work. And he and his partner sold Dodge Brothers cars as sort of a side hustle. So they sold cars and did blacksmithing stuff. And he did that from 1908 until 1923. It's interesting because Richtig wasn't a forging maker. He was not a bladesmith, but he did have a bunch of blacksmithing experience because obviously, right, he did it for all those years. I guess that's 15 years plus the apprentice time of a couple years. While he was working as a blacksmith in this blacksmith shop, he was experimenting with tempering of knife blades. And that led him to using an electric furnace, which I don't know how common that was in 1923.
That's what I was about to say. When I read that, I was like, that had to be one of the first uses of that.
Yeah.
I would assume.
I would assume so too, but I don't know a lot about the history of the equipment piece of it, but yeah, I thought it was really kind of an interesting twist. He opened his own shop in 1925. So he did the blacksmithing thing. He started playing around with tempering of blades, kind of went off, and I assume from 23 to 25, probably he was figuring out what to do, right? Like how he was going to set this business up. When he opened his shop in 1925, he started selling knives under his own name. And the big focus was on kitchen knives with these poured aluminum handles. They started at 50 cents a piece in 1925. And kind of their thing was that they were flexible and hard, but they were soft enough to sharpen. That's sort of the description that they give about those knives. Tom, since you own one, I've seen these before, but you have one. You probably have it in your hand, knowing you. But can you describe the poured aluminum handle and what it's like?
Yeah, it's very similar to the Murphy knives, but basically it's just a smooth aluminum handle that's been poured. The blades on the kitchen knives are really thin. The one on mine is probably 16th or something like that. It's really thin. But yeah, cuts great.
Yeah. So they must have a tang that goes in, and then he poured the handle around the tang.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons these knives were popular is because of that aluminum handle, right? They weren't wood handles, right? Which apparently were quite the thing back then, which makes sense. And when you wash them and subjected them to a ton of use, the wood would get weird and start to separate from the tang and other stuff, and they would hold debris and bacteria. So they were kind of considered, working kitchen knives that didn't tend to absorb the shit that gets on knives when you're using them. So that was kind of a part of their feature or attraction. And yeah, the notes I have, Tom, is that the kitchen knives were, exactly that 1/16 tool steel.
Yeah, I think I saw that they were. Don't they think they were either 1090 or 1095?
Oh, see, you're spoiling the story. It's a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Sorry, Mark.
See, Tom jumps right to the end of the story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Remember, Tom?
Damn it.
So Richtig, in addition to the kitchen knives, which were kind of his mainstay, he also made hunting knives, which, right, that whole kind of Midwest area, big hunting community. So he made hunters with poured handles, but they were a lot less common than the kitchen knives. The hunters were thicker. They were 1/8-inch stock in many cases, or most cases. They were a hit with hunters. They were easy to care for. Like I said, one of their claims to fame was that they would keep an edge, but they were also easy to sharpen. And they were able to be had for a very fair price. So they were very popular with hunters as utility knives. So the most popular or common are the kitchens, then these hunting knives, and then I guess the most rare are Richtig knives that actually have brass guards and butt caps, along with stacked leather and fiber handles. There were hunters done this way, and then the combat knives in many cases were done this way. The combat knives were double-edged daggers, and there's a clip point, and most of those were made during World War II. Richtig was quite prolific as a maker. In this article from B.R. Hughes, B.R.'s estimate was that Richtig was putting out well over 300 knives a year and estimated 10,000 plus knives in total, which is a shitload of knives.
It's crazy.
So like I said, he wasn't a bladesmith. He didn't forge the blades. He was a stock removal maker, which is kind of funny, right? Because the Richtig picture that's part of the Ripley thing shows him basically pounding a blade through a piece of steel, but it's at a forge, and that became part of his mark, right? So his mark is him standing at an anvil, swinging a hammer, which might lead you to believe that he's a bladesmith, but he was a stock removal guy. So Frank and his wife Mary would travel around to county fairs and other places to sell his knives. And Laren mentioned this when he talked about Richtig. Right? Frank Richtig was very much a showman, right? He knew how to use this sort of flashy demo as a way to get people's attention and to show them how great his knives were. I found a picture in this Clarkson, Nebraska history site that actually showed the display board that he would take around. That had all the different models of his kitchen knives and other stuff. It was laid out really, really cool. He made a bunch of different knives, a bunch of different patterns. I don't even know how many were on there. Probably 30, 40. Lots of different sizes. Big butcher knives, down to paring knives, and everything in between, plus the hunters and other stuff.
That was a bunch.
Yeah. So anyway, he would bring an anvil, and that was kind of what people said when he got older, right? He would bring this anvil and do these demos, and he didn't stop bringing the anvil till he couldn't carry the anvil anymore, right? So he did this for many, many, many years. He would bring an anvil out, he would set it up and do these demos where he'd cut up chunks of steel with his kitchen knives, basically hammering them through. And he was quite the talker, which is interesting because one of the articles I read said that he had a very thick accent and that he had a partner, and the partner was kind of the talker, you know what I mean, who did a lot of the presentation kind of talking when they did these demos. But apparently Richtig himself really, really liked to talk. It was said that you couldn't leave his shop without at least 30 minutes of conversation. We have some friends like that, so I get it. Also, apparently he was quite the stubborn sort of guy. You didn't want to be on his bad side. If he didn't like you, he wouldn't sell you knives no matter how much money you wanted to spend. And so we're coming up on the Ripley thing here. So Richtig was doing these demos and traveling around, and then he cut the hardened lock off a jail cell door in Cedar Bluffs. And that is what got the attention of the Ripley's Believe It or Not people, which had to be kind of wild. I wonder how that got set up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Pretty cool story.
Heck yeah. Cut through a padlock.
Broke into jail with it.
Yeah, this isn't like a cake that's got a kitchen knife hidden inside. I guess it could, but it'd be hard to swing a hammer from inside the cell.
Yeah, it seems you have the story, right?
That's about all I have on the story. If you got more, go for it.
Well, okay, so it's hard. It makes you wonder, as much of a showman as he was, whether this was set up or not. So in 1938, he was demonstrating and selling his handmade knives in Cedar Bluffs, Nebraska. And a local marshal approached him, it happened to be at the time, and he had lost the key to a padlock securing one of the cell doors. Why, you would just approach a knife maker that happens to be there, to do this? Who knows? I guess he was asked to be shown the lock, and it had a 5/8 inch loop. He placed the knife on a loop and hammered through it. And then he carried the lock with him around because he had to break into this door.
Wow.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? It seems a lot of coincidence. Who knows? It could be, but.
Yeah, is the first guy you call the guy with the kitchen knives to get your padlock undone?
But very interesting story.
You said that was in 38?
1938.
Interesting. So the version of the story I heard was that happened, and that's what got the attention of the Ripley people. And the Ripley thing came out in 1936, November 18th of 1936, in fact. So I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe he did see that, and he was like, well, I know a guy that can cut through some stuff.
Maybe so. We get a time discrepancy. So we don't really know, I guess, what the order was, right? Did the cutting the lock lead to the Ripley thing, which is the version I heard, or did the Ripley thing lead to cutting the lock? We don't know.
Who knows? And he's supposedly of Czech descent, right? He's, you said he had a thick accent, but he was born here, right?
Oh, that's a good question. Was he born here? I don't know if I have that in here.
It said he was born on a farm in Colfax County.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe his parents were first generation or, whatnot.
I would guess so.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's what he learned to speak when he was growing up and kind of picked English up later. I don't know. So anyway, this Ripley's Believe It or Not thing happened. We'll share a picture of it for anyone who hasn't. Lots and lots of people have seen this Ripley snippet. And old people like me will remember seeing these in the newspaper, right? They would print these kind of in the corner in the newspaper, these Ripley's Believe It or Not. Don't you mean a news website? Yeah. So this Ripley's blurb, the language or the verbiage in there says, the village smith of Clarkson, Nebraska, cuts cold steel, tool steel, auto parts, railroad spikes, buggy axles in two with a butcher knife, all caps, and then cuts paper with the same knife, ! And I think from looking at that picture for a little bit, or the sketch, I think that's a buggy axle that he's cutting, which some of our listeners won't even know what a buggy axle is, but like a horse and buggy, the steel axle that goes across that the wheels ride on. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting to call out buggy axles. I guess sign of the time in 1936, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple years later in 1938, he had done a demo of this amazing cutting ability of these kitchen knives. So you got to remember, again, these are 16th inch stock kitchen knives that he's pounding through stuff, which realistically makes sense, right? He would get people's attention doing that. He did a demo in front of 200 blacksmiths over 2 days, and he was honored in 1938 by the National Blacksmith and Welders Association with a letter of commendation, which is kind of funny considering he didn't actually forge the knives, but
It's pretty cool.
It is cool. So he was named a master ironsmith.
Huh.
Yeah. I think in the town history website link that I have, in that write-up, I think there's actually a copy of that letter, which is pretty cool to read. And then, again, most of his sales were actually via mail order, which is kind of wild to think about, right, given the day and age. He had a printed catalog, flyer kind of thing with instructions on how to order, pictures of the patterns. And I read through the catalog. I thought that was pretty cool. And, to order knives, send cash, it says.
Which is illegal now.
I like his style.
Yeah. So Sean supports that message. Send cash.
Oh, yeah.
All right. When the U.S. entered World War II, Richtig modified his hunter patterns to create two main combat models. Like I mentioned earlier, there was a double-edged dagger, a symmetric dagger, and then a double-flared... Oh, sorry. The dagger had a double-flared crown pommel, so it was very symmetric in shape. And then there was a clip point that had a bird's head pommel, and both had big flared guards. They're pretty cool-looking knives. If you haven't seen them, there's pictures out there I can drop some in.
Dude, I love them. The dagger is so, it's like classic World War II type dagger stuff.
Yeah.
I sent a picture of the dagger.
Yeah, so they're pretty, right? Fiber, stacked leather.
Oh, yeah.
And big guard. They're good-looking knives.
Very randly, scagly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Skagel's the first thing I thought of when I saw him.
Yeah.
If you look at that picture I sent from this October 2014 issue of Knife World, it's interesting because... he marked the blades, but in some cases on these combat knives, he actually stamped his logo into the leather.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. I don't know how long that would last, but...
It's interesting up top. There's a hoof knife.
Yeah.
That he made.
Yeah, with that poured handle setup. FJ Richtig right in the handle. The writer of the military Richtig knives article says that he has seen this handle marking style on a number of Richtig knives where it's actually stamped into the leather. So we'll share that picture in the Facebook group when this comes out. Let's see, what else do I have? The fighting knives were usually shipped with a heavy leather sheath by Alfred Cornish so that Richtig could focus on making knives. These combat knives were a huge hit with the soldiers. So he was making these combat knives full-time during the war, like nonstop. And his wife, Mary, helped him, and she kept the books, and he made knives, and Alfred made the sheaths. And when you look at these knives, a bunch of the pictures, there are a whole bunch of different sheaths. Some of them are sort of standard commercially available sheaths. Some of them were these Alfred Cornish sheaths, and there's a variety of... things going on out there with sheaths. He didn't make them himself. Richtig was kind of known for giving away these combat knives. He would give them to locals who were heading off to war. In addition to supporting his local guys that were heading out to go to war, he sent knives to MacArthur, Patton, Nimitz, and Eisenhower.
Wow.
Yeah, he actually sent a knife to...
That's pretty cool.
He sent a knife to Roosevelt as well.
Huh.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Nimitz actually sent him back a signed photo of Nimitz aboard the USS Missouri signing the surrender documents in Tokyo Harbor. And he sent that to Richtig. Richtig was super proud of it. He hung it in his shop, and it was hanging there all the way till he passed.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that'd be quite a keepsake, right? Signed photo from Nimitz. That'd be wild. So after the war, he went back to making kitchen knives and hunting knives. And just kind of kept on rocking. So he got his, the big splash was the Ripley thing that sort of put him on the map nationwide, and then that took off. And so when the combat knives came along, they were super, super popular. Like I said, there's this website dedicated to Clarkson, Nebraska history, and there's an article called "Secrets of the Dead: The Richtig Knife," and it's a pretty cool write-up. There's a guy who grew up there in Clarkson, and when he was young, at his school, they went on various school field trips. They went to see some farming stuff. They went to dairy operations. They went to the newspaper printer to see how newspapers get made. And one trip they made was down the street and around the corner to Richtig's shop. And they got to see one of the buggy axle demos being cut up with a kitchen knife, and he was super, super fascinated by it. So there's some really neat pictures in the article of Richtig at his shop.
Yeah, that article is really cool.
Yeah, pretty cool to read, and from a local perspective, which was really neat. There was a clip in there from the Colfax County Press from October 1935 where they talk about Richtig and his shop and the recognition that he was starting to get. And there's a statement in there that it won't be long and Clarkson will be famous as a cutlery manufacturing point, which I thought was pretty cool. They were pretty excited about it.
We think about how many knives he was making, man. I mean, it really does sound like he was super prolific.
Yeah, 10,000 plus knives. If B.R. Hughes is right, I'm sure. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know how many years that was over, but yeah, crazy.
Yeah. What would we say? 1925 to 1977, he was making knives.
Makes my head hurt.
52 years.
52 years.
Yeah. It makes your head hurt. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So one of the things I thought was interesting from that Clarkson website is there is a picture from earlier in his career, and the original spelling of his name is Rychtig. And then apparently later changed it. But there's the sign for the shop actually is spelled Richtig with a Y.
Huh.
Yeah.
I've never come across that before.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't heard it before either. And then he moved to the spelling that he's kind of known for, Richtig.
If you do the math, 10,000 knives over 52 years isn't that much. That's only like 200 knives a year. I'm guessing he probably made more than 10,000.
Probably. I mean, he might have been going a little slower when he was 90.
Yeah, true.
Because he didn't share how he did this with anybody.
Nope.
Right? So I think this is a one-man show for the most part. Although I thought I saw in one of the things that he had somebody that was helping him.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because it's a ridiculous amount of knives, and the steel that he used really isn't known, right? There was some work done that I'll talk about in a minute to figure it out. But he certainly didn't tell anybody what steel it was. He didn't talk about heat treat, and those were really secretive things. He took that stuff to the grave with him, hence the title of that history article, right? Secrets of the Dead. He never told anybody about his techniques as he, quote, couldn't find anyone worthy.
Yeah, it's kind of crap, honestly. I've always disliked the whole take your knowledge to the grave thing.
I don't know. I think it's kind of a cool story.
Part of the mystery for sure.
That's how, I mean, we were talking about him today because of that, about what he did. And
yeah, but we'd still be talking about him if he shared his techniques.
I don't know. It's pretty metal. It'd be moved on to someone else and they would have done it and overtaken it and said, I did it. I don't know. To me,
I mean, he's already in Ripley's. Yeah. I mean, leave it when you die. I don't know.
Okay, I get it. But, I like the idea of the mystique.
Yeah, he said, somebody asked him, are you going to, it must have been later in his life, somebody asked him, are you going to share some of this stuff with somebody before you pass? And he said, a man is entitled to some secrets, and that's mine.
Good for him, man. That's his shit.
Yeah. So markings on the knives, FJR over Clarkson, NEB, Nebraska. Handmade by F.J. Richtig, Clarkson, Nebraska. And then he had what they called a trademark stamp, which is sort of a line art simplified version of that Ripley art. So it's basically him standing, swinging a hammer, standing at the anvil, even though he's a stock removal maker.
Asterix.
Yeah, right. And then, like I mentioned, some of the fighters had these stamps on the stacked leather. So to better understand all of this, right? So here's this guy made these crazy knives that were super thin that somehow could pound through steel. One of his descendants, also a knife maker named Dale Novak, sent two original Richtig knives to Lawrence Livermore lab for analysis. And I think some of this stuff Laren talked about, and he went into great detail in this article on his website. So people that are interested in this will want to go to Laren's site and read that article. We'll link it in the Facebook group. The summary coming out of Lawrence Livermore was that the knives were probably 1090 or 1095. And Birch is over there doing the happy dance on the 1095 thing. I told you.
Oh, yeah.
So what was in the Lawrence Livermore summary was that they were heated to 1400 F, austenitized, and rapid quenched and held at 600 F, which means that they had to be in some kind of isothermal salt or molten lead bath.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the analysis summary out of Lawrence Livermore. And so, there was stuff in the Lawrence Livermore report that suggested maybe Richtig figured out this ostempering thing before a bunch of other scientists did. Laren says no. Laren says no. So you can read about details about that in Laren's article. The interesting part is the two knives that Dale Novak sent to Lawrence Livermore labs were 39 Rockwell C and 50 Rockwell C. So very wide range of hardness, right? Not consistent at all. And if you remember our discussions with Laren, that's one of the things Laren points out, right? Is that these Richtig knives look like they were kind of all over the place as far as hardness. Laren actually bought one. I don't remember if he said if he bought it off eBay or what. The tip was broken, so he got it cheap, but he's like, I don't care, I'm going to cut it up anyway. A really good article from Laren, right? It's very detailed analysis. So if you like metallurgy stuff, you'll love this article. Lots of detail in it. His Richtig is 57 Rockwell C. So his is even higher than one of the ones that was at Lawrence Livermore. And so Laren kind of says, no, look, this guy really did not have great control over the hardness. So I think in our Metallurgy Mythbusters episode with Laren, he talked about makers kind of using the eyeball pyrometer, right? Like, yep, that looks like it's hot enough. So stop there. And so Laren's hypothesis is that he didn't austemper his knives, but instead likely under-austenitized the blades, and says the demos were probably as much about edge geometry as they were about secret heat treat.
Gotta love that edge geometry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting article at Knife Steel Nerds, I thought.
Yeah, very good. Very good write-up. Lots of detail.
Kind of weird to think that even the hardest one of all three tested was only 57.
Right.
And, he's in Ripley's, believe it or not, because of that, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah, Tom, have you taken a lightweight Coos Deer Hunter and pounded it through a buggy axle lately?
I have not.
You might want to.
I think maybe pounding it through steel, it might not hurt being softer.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't know that my knives would hold up to that.
I think the Lawrence Livermore people actually did that. They tried to recreate it, or maybe there was another study where they recreated, and then they took a commercially available kitchen knife, and the commercially available kitchen knife basically chipped like mad, right?
Yeah.
Didn't necessarily get very far. And the one that they created didn't turn out really to be exactly the same heat treat, but it did pound through steel without being damaged, at least allegedly.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting. Good description from Laren. Nice write-up. I think it's safe to describe Richtig as a legendary maker, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. He certainly had a huge fan base, right, for his work. People loved his knives. He's obviously, right, he sold probably well north of 10,000 of them. Very effective showman and promoter. And, that whole story definitely captures the imagination.
Yeah.
And I like that part of Laren's write-up too, where he said, I think it's BS, but clearly he made good knives and people loved them, so good for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an effective salesman, right, which is kind of a big piece of the business. So that's it. I think that's all I have on Richtig.
You actually have way, way more than I have on my guy.
Oh yeah.
So I'm glad you were able to carry this one for us.
That was impressive.
Like I said, it was pulling together a bunch of things, and I'm actually not sure. I have the Knives 84 book sitting right here. I'm not sure I actually dug into that, but the B.R. Hughes article that he wrote back in May of 88, the article is in part in Knife World in May of 88, was about a guy named Harlan, I'm going to get his name wrong, Sudmeier, Sudmeier.
Yeah.
Sid Sudmeier, as he went by, apparently.
Yeah, that's the article in Knives 88.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Okay.
He was a collector.
Okay. Yeah, right, exactly. He was a collector, but apparently that collector learned about his these Richtig knives in Knives 84, Knives Annual 84. So in just a few years, he had amassed a pretty substantial Richtig collection. And so that's what got B.R. Hughes' attention. Like, wait a second, what? You put all these knives together in how long? So
yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah. There's a funny quote in Laren's article where he actually reached out to Sid Sudmeier and asked him about Richtig. And apparently Sid had since sold his collection off because these knives got much more valuable over the years, right? And I think these Hunters are worth a few grand a piece sort of deal. I'm sorry, the combat knives. apparently Sid sold off his collection, and Laren asked, what do you attribute this this ability to cut through steel? What do you attribute it to? And Sid said, practice. Which I thought was pretty cool. So, yeah, interesting stuff. All right, I'm sure listeners are sick of hearing me ramble, but that's what I got on Richtig. I got a bunch of these articles. I won't post the articles because they're in Knife World Archive. Anybody who loves this kind of stuff, it's worth signing up to Knife World's whatever they have, like a subscription or online stuff, to have access to every issue of Knife World over many, 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 many years. And it's searchable, and you can find some awesome stuff in there. Looking at these old copies of the magazine is really cool. Even just seeing the ads in the magazine, it's pretty fab. So if you like history, that's well worth doing over at the Knife World website. And thanks, Clay, for helping us out. Who's coming up next? Sean, or you're gonna talk about your guy, right? Your mentor.
My mentor and friend, yes. And I've actually got a little bit of a visual companion thrown together, so I'm going to be throwing pics at you guys kind of as we go through timeline, because, I mean, he's definitely got, different styles as time progresses. And it's going to be cool because you can see he's kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
His early stuff was pretty wicked.
Oh, yeah. All right, so why don't you talk about who you're going to talk about here, Sean, and lead us on into it.
All right, we're going to talk about my friend, mentor, Mike Franklin of Hog Knives. I think he's a guy who doesn't get the credit he deserves for the way he's influenced what the modern tactical folder field has become, and I felt I would be remiss if I didn't give him a solid mention in this episode.
Very nice. I like the picking a mentor thing. That's real cool.
It made it easy. I'm pragmatic if I'm nothing.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe you can only have so many of those, but I like it. I like it. So I know almost nothing about Mike and his history, so teach me about Mike.
All right. When Mike first came into the custom knife world, he was actually a vocal music teacher.
Really?
Yeah. He taught vocal music 5 years before he went full-time as a maker. And what really got him making knives is he picked up the first edition of the Guns Digest Book of Knives. And he made his first knife going by some articles in that. And as chance and outrageous fortune would have it, Bill Pease lived on Mike's route to work.
Yeah, nice.
And they ended up meeting each other, and Bill gave him tips and tricks and really helped him get started there and got the ball rolling on his making career.
Did Bill have a sign hung out front or something? Or did people know that?
Oh, now, I'm telling you wrong. Bill's drive to work took him by Mike's shop. And dude, we're in a really small area here, and everybody kind of knows everybody pretty much, especially when, you've lived here your entire life. Your family's family lived here their entire life. You know?
Sure, yeah.
And I'm sure that Mike knew, well, that's Bill Pease. He's that guy who makes knives.
Yeah, okay.
I can just about guarantee you that's how that came to be.
Right. Yeah. Small town world, right? So that's that life. Everybody knows what everybody else does for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. And Bill really helped him out there with getting him going. And as chance would have it, Mike moved to Indiana for a little bit. And in the town he was living in Indiana, they had a black powder rendezvous. It was a yearly thing. And he went to it one year, and Jimmy Lyle was set up there.
Oh, wow.
And he and Jimmy really hit it off. And Mike really credits Jimmy as being a mentor to him, having really helped him out. I mean, the first time I ever saw a real First Blood, it was a genuine, early Jimmy Lyle First Blood directly from Jimmy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was Mike's. He had bought it, when the movie came out. And just gorgeous, man. I mean, really, if you haven't seen one of those Lyle First Bloods, you're really missing out. They are fantastic knives.
Yeah.
But I digress. That was in 73 when he met Jimmy. And then that same year, he went to I think it was the second time they had the guild show. And he ended up joining the guild and becoming a voting member the year after, and that's when he went full-time.
So he was doing the knife making thing kind of on the side until that transition.
Yeah. He was working full-time as a vocal music teacher until 74.
Wow.
And in 74, he quit the teaching position and went full-time as a knife maker.
I assume the teaching thing was at the local school or whatever. Is that?
Yeah. He taught on the high school level.
Okay.
At the time, he was doing what was popular at the time. Here, I'll send you a picture of one of his more standard models. I know he did at least 100 and some of these for A.G. Russell.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a Stellite boot knife.
Oh, very cool.
Yes, Stellite blade, tapered tang, soldered guard, leather sheath, and, just a really good-looking double-edged boot knife.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's pretty de rigueur for that point in time. That was a popular model. A lot of guys did interpretations of those.
Yep. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like that one's blasted, maybe? It's hard to tell from the picture.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just disadvantageous lighting or if it was blasted. I'm thinking it's the lighting.
Yeah.
Because I don't think at that point in time, blasted blades were very much in favor.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I think it was viewed as a phone-in finish.
Yeah.
I mean, but back then, you were looking at, well, it needs a solder guard, it needs a tapered tang, and mirror finished.
Right.
That's what people fucking wanted.
Yep.
Which would also make sense with the picture and how it's reflecting.
Yeah.
And I have seen him mirror finish Stellite before.
Right.
No shit.
Yeah, that's no joke.
Yeah, for real.
Very cool.
And now, we'll say that, things went on this way. Everything was kind of par for the course for what was going on in the industry until about 1995. And now I'm going to send you a picture here. We'll call this one of the pre-hog knives, but you can see from this picture where the hog knives would come from, where the tactical element would start coming in.
Oh, yeah.
There's a different logo on that one. It's still M.H. Franklin knives.
Yeah.
But you can see where the thought process started to change. And he started to evolve his design aesthetic. And now, what the really important thing here happened in 1995. And Mike went on a hog hunt in Texas with one of his friends. And middle of the hunt, his friend started having chest pains. And they was like, well, shit, you're not feeling good. Let's get back to Ohio and we'll get you to a doctor before it gets too much worse. And on the drive, his friend really deteriorated and they had to stop in Little Rock, Arkansas and drop him off at the emergency room.
Wow.
And then Mike made the drive from Little Rock to Aberdeen solo, which is a considerable drive.
Yeah.
And he said, I had all of that time to just think. And he said, I wanted to start making more tactical knives, something that was really more user grade, something that I could make more affordable. And I can't find any pictures really of those early hog knives, but they were real simple, full tang knives, high carbon steel. Most of them were 1095 with either a blasted or a Brownells baking lacquer coating, pretty rudimentary Kydex sheath, but just a really good, honest working knife, especially for the price. I think they were like, $95 to $100 at the time.
Wow.
And from there, the tactical crowd really took to those. He was selling a lot of those, and he moved into folding knives. More importantly, the liner lock folder as we know it. And that's when things started to really get funky. And that's where his influence on what we do now really comes into play. I'm getting ready to send you several pictures that are going to illustrate what I'm talking about.
So this is like you said, a transition thing, right? Where he's going from making kind of the typical knives of the day to something that was a little unusual for the time, really, right? I mean, kind of
very unusual for the time.
Yeah.
Pictures are open and I'm sending, and you'll see it's a big design evolution here that you're going to witness.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, at the time, nobody else was doing anything even remotely close to that.
Yeah.
I mean, what we think of now as radical tactical, he kind of helped invent that, if not solely invented it. Nice.
Yeah, real funky, super compound, you name it, right? Lots going on with these knives.
Yeah, dude. I mean, yeah, 5 grinds on one side sometimes. Some of them had these crazy, crazy aggressive serrations.
Yeah.
And even like the one I sent you that's fancy. I mean, still, you've got weird compound bevels, really interesting modified recurve Wharncliffe blade shape.
Yeah.
And that super interesting TI overlay on the blade.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, and just a fantastic, good-looking knife.
Yeah. So this one that Sean's talking about, we'll share it in the group, but it has sort of what we saw Les Voorhees do later, right? That shadow box bolster and scale kind of thing, right? Where they sit inside with a little gap around the outside. And then, yeah, this, sort of a sandwich blade kind of thing almost.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah, and the, TI that's on the blade, it mimics the blade bevels in its shape. And
Right. Wild.
Yeah, just really outside the box.
Huh.
And like I said, I think the argument can be made that we wouldn't have the same movement toward radical tactical that we would see. And I certainly think that at least a lot of makers wouldn't have had the courage at the time to start trending that way and maybe pushing some boundaries, pushing the envelope and seeing what they could do with blade shapes and just letting their imaginations run wild.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that he started making these price point knives, and then maybe subsequently or maybe in parallel, he was building
It was subsequent.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of interesting. I can see where a guy might want to have like a price point line, you know what I mean, that tries to help pay the bills and is accessible, and then sort of like a bunch of, higher end stuff. Kind of like some guys will do today with a production project or a mid-tech or something like that. But these were all linear on the timeline. Is that right? Or was he doing both in the same kind of time frame?
Once he started doing the folders, he just out of necessity scaled back big time on the fixed blades.
I gotcha.
Because they just really came to the forefront. They were so fresh and new. People just were, eating them up.
Awesome.
Then we'll show you a little more where the evolution of those knives went. This is one of my favorites.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a model called the Warlock.
Huh.
And just, I don't even know what to call that blade shape.
Yeah.
And he referred to the...
Logo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he referred to the serrations as his chainsaw serrations with good reason. I mean, big old teeth.
Right.
And he freehand ground those motherfuckers in.
Huh.
Oh, dude, I watched him do it. It was fucking nerve-wracking just to watch.
I
Doing
bet.
it right on the edge of a fucking contact wheel.
Yeah.
Edge up. Just like, gosh, dude, if that gets caught, your wheel's fucked, and maybe so are you.
Yeah, so people will see when we share the pictures, but so these are like big, almost like VEF style serrations, but instead of just being a round, like a tiny wheel profile, these actually are like double profiled inside a big old serration.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they were nasty.
Yeah, no kidding. And like you said, probably extremely nasty to make too. Oof.
Yeah, oh yeah, no room for error, man. You better wake up, have your coffee, and be sharp, man.
Yeah.
You won't do that.
No doubt. So yeah, this is like a hawk's bill, but with a recurved belly behind it that has these big old serrations. The holes in the blade thing was sort of a kind of a thing from the day, right? I mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Very kind
big
of
time.
Typical tricked out knife of the day kind of thing.
Yeah, it was quite popular, which he was one of the guys who actually helped to popularize that.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting, more of this handle overlay type setup, and it's really wild what he's doing even with the overlay, right? The fact that it's got really distinct shapes. I wonder what that was all about.
Dude, to be honest with you, I think on that, it was remnant pieces from other builds.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't want to waste them.
Huh.
Necessity being the mother of invention, you get that guy.
Right. Check that out.
But it works, It doesn't look like, oh, this was scrap. What can I do with it? It looks very, very, very intentional.
Yeah. Wow.
And I mean, to a certain extent it was. If he didn't think that it was going to work, he wouldn't have used it.
Right.
And now, he never shied away from trying new stuff or innovating, which you can see from the one I just sent to you. And this is a take on what he called his Serengeti Hunter.
Okay.
And the handle scale on that is a chisel ground drop point that swings off.
Yeah. Okay.
And more than likely, there's a chisel ground tonto on the other side to make the other scale.
Yeah, right.
And he did several variations on this. CRKT actually did a production version of it called the Serengeti Hunter, and there was, I believe it was a drop point on one side and an upswept skinner on the other.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even notice it at first. I'm like, oh, okay, this is just another kind of funky overlay. And then you said a blade, and I'm like, oh shit, there is a knife there. It's like hidden in plain sight kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how exactly is that retained, or how does that all work? Is that bolt head that you see kind of in the middle, is it a plunger that lets it swing out, or?
That one in the middle is a stop, and this is an early one. Eventually, he went to a bent titanium spring retention system.
Okay.
But the screw toward the back there, the kind of thumb screw looking guy, you would take that out and then swing the knife off.
Oh, okay. Wow. 3 knives in one.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, that's a trip. At first I was like, before I realized that there was a second blade there, I'm like, why? He's logoed out, man. He's got logo on the blade and logo on the handle. And it's like, oh shit, that's not the handle. That's another blade.
Yep.
Wow. So single side grind on the blade. That's why it could sit flush and not cut you while you have it in your pocket or whatever.
Exactly.
That's pretty slick, man.
Yeah, dude, the fact that CRKT did a factory version of it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of pocket knives. The CRKT version was. The handmaids were a little slimmer.
Yeah.
And he did some that were smaller. CRKT version was a pretty decent sized pocket knife.
I bet. So this one, for the people listening, is also a multi-grind, big old compound in the center. Same kind of big toothy, super duper serrations. Wow. That's a very cool piece, man.
Yeah. Like I said, man, he was willing to, just totally go outside of the box and roll with it.
Yeah.
And gave a lot of other guys the courage to do the same.
So I wonder, did he ever talk about with Jimmy Lyle as a mentor? I mean, Jimmy did some funky shit too, right? So maybe it's not super surprising that he would this is all kind of next level from stuff of Jimmy's that I've seen, right?
Yeah.
But did he ever talk about what Jimmy thought of any of this, or what his contemporaries thought of this kind of stuff?
I know that at the time it was people either loved it or hated it.
Right.
I don't know what Jimmy's thoughts on it were, but at the time it was kind of polarizing.
I can imagine. This is pretty wild stuff for the time. I mean, today it seems like you see people doing grinds on grinds all over the place, but yeah, in the day this had to be avant-garde at the minimum.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Very much so. I mean, especially, 95, 96, it was unheard of because it was a tactical working knife, but it kind of looked like a fantasy knife, but it wasn't a fantasy knife.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a fantasy-ish element for sure.
But I mean, like, especially with the hog tantos, a lot of thought into those. They're actually really good performing knives, especially the blade shapes, especially, for slashing.
Right.
And I mean, they were plenty stabby enough, but with some of the weird drops on those and the angles they hit, just, if you caught it on somebody's arm, dude, you're going to lay them open to the bone.
Right.
Yeah. He did those for quite a while, and he's in semi-retirement now. Semi-retirement. He makes knives, but he makes what he wants to make when he wants to make it, or if somebody has an interesting gun trade.
There you go.
Is basically the thing. And I'll send you pictures of some of his most recent stuff. And it's kind of cool because he's sort of come full circle.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the Lyle inspiration on the two I sent, and then just that total cool old school Bowie on the other one.
Yeah. No, those are awesome.
Yeah, man, the survival looking guys are wicked cool. I got to handle a couple of those. They're light and quick and just really nice survival pieces.
Yeah. That brass back is awesome.
Yeah, right.
Wow. So Sean sent these, he described it well. They're sort of Lyle-ish survival style, both recurve bowies, big lugged guards, right? Looks like they have a threaded cap handle, like a hollow handle sort of setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compass in the butt cap, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Then the other one is a big old, I assume it's big. It looks big in the picture.
Yeah, it's a large knife.
Right. A big old brass back buoy with S-guard. Wait, that thing's pretty.
Yeah, and gorgeous stag carver for the handle.
Oh, yeah. Right. And it looks like he did the thing with picking up the contour and funkiness of the stag right into the butt cap with what looks like a little ferrule on the end or something, right?
Yeah, brass kind of nipply ferrule.
There you go.
Which complements the balls on the guard.
Yep. Well, he's clearly still got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's just cool that he's come full circle.
Yeah, that is interesting. Kind of went on a little journey and kind of made it, looks like most of the way back home. Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, you can still see that funky tactical influence, at least on the survival knives. And dude, I would argue that you can see it a little bit in that semi-traditional bowing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we can say semi-traditional.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's not certainly not a straight up traditional buoy by any stretch, right? It's got a really deep swedge, clip point kind of thing.
Yeah, great, funky, cool swedge.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think that's what makes the piece really pop.
Yeah, and that throws hard back to that sort of funky generation of stuff he was doing.
Yeah, but I mean, there's more than a nod to tradition in it also.
Absolutely. Well, very cool, man. I went out looking, so I found a few. This one I'm sending Sean is actually the ones I found. These are all boot knives that I found.
That's an early piece.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's probably somewhere between 88 and probably 92, 93.
Oh, wow.
And dude, the funny thing is that's actually beta alloy on that handle.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah, he didn't find that out till later. He actually got like a 55-gallon drum of remnant cuts of titanium.
Wow. So the one I sent Sean is a real cool, very classy boot with sort of that overlay style handle with, the kind of Crawford-esque looking hole pattern toward the very back. And then, some very funky, late 80s, early 90s funky rainbow kind of handle in the tie. But
that's when people were really just starting to experiment with anodizing titanium.
Yeah. All right. So then, these Stellite boot knives, those things are pretty, man. Like you said, when I saw these, I'm like, no, these are all like polished out Stellite. Damn.
Yep. That pearl piece, dude, he loved pearl.
Oh, yeah.
Probably still does.
I bet. Oh, yeah, and that one's got the date right on the handle. 5 of 89. Diamond drag on the blade. That's cool.
Yep.
Nice. Did he make the sheaths too, or did he have somebody that was helping him with leather work?
Either he made them or his wife made them.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, this one is like a little pearl. I don't know. What would you call this shape? A little bit like a city knife, kind of?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not a horny. It's not a drop point.
Right. And it's bigger than it looks. In my first glance at this picture, I was thinking, oh, this is a little guy. And it's not huge by any stretch, but it's probably every bit of 3.5 or, I don't know, maybe not 4, but close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that pearl piece. And then the other one is another high-polished Stellite with a guard with stag in this same handle shape as the first one you sent me with, the one you sent with black handles, the one I asked if it was polished out or blasted. This one's definitely polished out with stag. Very pretty.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's definite presentation grade. That's gorgeous stag on that, too.
Isn't it? So pretty.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that tang is tapered thin at the butt.
Yeah?
Yeah, probably like, I would guess 40 thou.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like thin.
Well, great stuff, man. You got anything else you want to throw in there about Mike? That's a very nice little excursion we went on talking about his stuff.
Man, I mean, you saw a nice evolutionary trip through a maker's work.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely share all the pictures in the group. We'll have a visual guide to go along with.
Right. That's what we'll have to do is we'll have to each put a thread out there with the maker we picked with some of the pictures and articles and other stuff that we dug up.
Yeah, because man, with the folders, I know that we haven't done justice to the funkiness.
Yeah, and some people are going to pull some out of the woodwork too.
Oh, yeah. He was pretty prolific.
Yeah. Thanks for telling us about your mentor, man.
My pleasure, man. I'm glad to give him some credit because he deserves it. Like I said, he helped a lot of makers, get that gumption to be like, hey, I'm going to make this because I want to make this, not because I think it's what the market demands.
All right. Very cool. Mike Franklin history from Sean and some really cool pieces in there. Beautiful knives. Let's go to Michael. Michael, you're up next. I think you got a great maker you're going to talk about. Who's your guy? And let's roll.
A great maker, but I think possibly the least amount of information, at least that I could find, about him. Joseph Cordova. We've mentioned one of his knives before. He was one of our picks, and he was been making for a long time. First knife in around 1953, though. In one of the articles I read, they say he didn't really start till 1970, so he must have messed around with a little bit before. But for me, he was one of those guys that really struck me as having one of the cooler grinds on a dagger that I've ever seen in my life. The very big, sweeping grinds on his Gladiator dagger, which really hit hard. It's that very, your Bill Luckett, the Chaparral type of grind and look and feel that really strikes a chord with these 70s knives when everyone else is doing sort of the Loveless style stuff, which he also did quite a bit of. He got his Master Smith stamp in 1993. He did both forging and stock removal. He did quite a bit of Loveless style stuff, ironically, which is very interesting. And he trained as like an aircraft and engineering technician, but something happened where he kind of hurt his back, and that's what I think transitioned him into making his knives more full-time like he did. So he must have been pretty damn good with the machine, I have to imagine.
Which is kind of crazy because our industry's kind of hard on backs too, though.
Right.
Yeah, but maybe he's one of those guys that kind of learned how to grind sitting down or something. It's one of those that's like, if I see someone doing that, I'm like, I need to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be better on you then. So he's done some beautiful shoot knives. He's done some of the classic Loveless style stuff, but he also has done folders. He's done like a little bit of everything. But it's that dagger that gets you every single time. And if you've looked at some of his daggers, I'll send you guys a picture. And the one I'm referencing is called generally the Gladiator dagger. Real wide blade, deep fuller. The grinds are just to die for. But I want you guys to look.
Do you remember which episode we talked about Cordova? Was it Fantasy Knives or something, or when was it?
I don't know. It was a pick of somebody. I don't even know who picked them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've seen this before. But it looks like he is insetting his handles, which is wholly unnecessary for, a full tang knife. And it's odd because it's not just like, but they're not perfectly even. So as a machinist or someone who's worked around a milling machine, you might know that people will use a rotary table, which, you can zero out, set it in the middle, and you can make a perfect circle. And you'd see that on some of the integral knives out there where they would machine a perfect type of circle where the tangs match front and back. But these aren't the same radius.
Yeah.
So whatever he did there, he's either pivoting around the pins holding it in or something different.
Huh.
But it's an extra step, probably a weight loss type of step that put a ton more time into it than he probably needed.
Imagine fitting the handles up to that.
Yeah.
No. See, I mean, and we'll share some pics whenever, this is out there and stuff, and you guys will see what we're talking about. But he was fairly prolific, I think, for me. They said despite his physical and time restrictions, because he said 150, 175 knives per year, which seems like quite a bit to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that Tom's over there like, oh, it's like one day.
It's a good month.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is that, like you said, he's doing on the dagger anyway, he's doing these like slightly inset handles, right?
Yeah.
It's not real deep. So you wonder why he did it. I
don't know. It's got to be weight, I think, because I think they're pretty thick blades. I've never gotten to actually hold one, which one day I've got to track one down.
257 blade stock on this one you sent us from Arizona. So yeah, pretty thick.
I'm pretty sure Luke has one and I've handled it.
That's what it was. Luke talked about it, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. So Joe was Luke's like mentor.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I can remember going to Luke's shop and Luke didn't have a way to mark his knives. He always had to go to Joe's shop to mark his knives.
Oh, to put his maker's mark on.
Yeah. Or that was early on, And he basically had a key to Joe's shop when he lived in New Mexico.
Yeah, I wonder if Luke knows why he did that inset handle thing.
That's that was in the back of my mind when I was looking stuff up, saying I knew we talked about it on the show, but I thought it was just a reference to a pic somewhere.
I actually sat next to Joe at Luke's wedding at the reception. We sat at the same table and we hung out, him and Kay, his wife.
Very cool.
Man.
He's still around. You could reach out and talk to him. He's a good dude.
Awesome. Might have to hit up that a little bit more and make that a little bit more of a extended old school maker guy.
Yeah.
But one of the things I found very interesting, because he was pretty popular. He had, at this time, when this is out of an article, the Gun Digest Books of Knives, the second edition. The year is a bunch of Roman numerals. So that means it's super old. But
which edition?
What's that?
Which edition?
The second. So it's probably, that's pretty early.
1973.
So yeah, at 73, he had like a 2.5 year wait list, which, we know how that can be. It can be a lot or a little, but if he's doing 150, 175 a year, that's not bad. But he had a quote here, or he had a thing, when he took an order, he tries to discourage the customer paying for the knife before it's completed. My experience has been that if the knife is paid for, they will, let me turn the page, start to wonder about the completion date well ahead of the promised delivery. I don't like to have their money in hand without being able to deliver the product at the same time.
Right.
That's we've said that one over and over, and
yeah,
good to know.
Yep.
But yeah, that's really about all I have on him. It's kind of amazing. It's out of New Mexico. He is, and it's kind of wild. We just right before the show, we're talking about somebody who had the same name, and then we realized it was his grandson.
Yeah, I think so. Joey Cordova.
Joey Cordova. But yeah, not a ton out there, but I'd like to know more for sure.
It looks like, was this a standard thing on this model dagger to have that little, what I assume is brass or copper plate where his mark is?
I don't think so. I've seen some without it, so I wonder if that was like an extra.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a pretty dressed up one compared to most of the ones I've seen.
Yeah, that's jazzy.
But to me, that's just, that blade is one of the quintessential ones that's stuck in my head for so long.
It's got a smatchety thing going.
It does. It's such a very sexy blade. And I think that work is, man, it's important. It's important to me.
Yeah. Or does this match it have a Cordova E-blade?
Ooh. Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, short and sweet on this one.
Very cool. Hey, this thing's got a big old buff line. Is that just from sharpening it, or you think it's convex? It looks like it has a secondary bevel that's kind of thick out toward the tip, so maybe it's not convex, but
I don't know.
I think they're deep hollow.
yeah.
Yeah, so
I would say so.
One of the interesting things, and I was trying to find the book, and I went and grabbed one, and I think I got the wrong one. I got the Great Collections by David Durham, but I think it's actually I think he's got a fixed blade book. But there's a collection of Joe's work in there, and he did a marbles knife that in there, if I remember correctly, a marble style with the like the ideal with the hollow center.
Oh, yeah.
It's really pretty. And from what Luke told me, I think, or maybe it was in that book, I think Loveless bought knives from Joe because he was one of the makers that he really liked and looked up to.
Interesting.
Huh. Yeah. We used to do supposedly this like hatchet, axe, and knife set. And his axes are pretty damn cool.
Yeah, I've got one of his. He did a skeletonized survival knife, like paracord wrapped.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got one of those. When Luke was down there, Joe was making some, and I was like, hey, can I get in on one of those? And I was fortunate to grab one. I thought we were also going to get Gladiuses, but I don't think he ever finished them.
Huh.
Oh, that would be pretty awesome.
He's a hell of a good dude. Super nice. Probably one of the more humble guys I know.
Yeah.
Especially when you know his past. I think he designed the Cold Steel Trailmaster also.
What?
Really?
Huh?
Yeah.
Huh.
No,
Pretty sure
that
he
I did
designed
not-
the Cold Steel Trailmaster.
I did not know that.
Interesting.
Really, really cool guy with the Mastersmith. He did a lot of stock removal. Super talented. Could make pretty much any kind of knife, period.
Yeah, you can kind of see it. I mean, it shows every, lockbacks, little forged and just everything kind of all over the place. But they're all well done. They're clean.
And literally sharp as a tack still. His body's letting him down now. Last time I talked to him, he could tell you anything you asked. We had a great conversation, and I think it'd be fun, and I would love to see this happen. I think these guys' stories need to be documented while they're still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to see that history put down. What they've seen and done is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of all of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we're here talking, right?
Right. But like we found, at least I found when I did my research, and I think you did this too. I mean, we're not getting the whole story. We're missing so much because it's literally not out there anywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I had a better memory, I would remember that Lucas, had worked with him. That might help me a little bit.
But if somebody else was out there looking, I mean,
yeah,
there just isn't much.
Right.
Yeah. But, these are also, I mean, there's so many too, there's throughout the years, there's been so many great makers, and there's only so many words that can be put down, so many books, so many articles.
Yep.
I guess one of the things that made me kind of sad on this whole thing was, I've never been a member of the Knife Makers Guild. You would think that if you were a member of the Knife Makers Guild, the guild would have some information and it'd be available out there, maybe they could put some of their dues towards that. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a member, but I mean, you think of all these great makers that were in the guild and there's literally nothing. They have no information, zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of these old dudes would want to put some of this information down, I mean,
I don't know. Yeah, it's going to get lost if we don't. something's not written about it.
Yeah, well,
Old.
you need like a literary historian knife summer student or something at the guild, right? I mean, unless you go pay somebody to actually do that work, it's not easy to get that stuff together.
No.
So
A scribe.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, join
and
the
the
guild
people
and
that
make
know
it
it,
happen, Tom.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah. The people that know it are dying, you know.
Well, you don't have you don't have long. You're going to have to get in the guild in a hurry.
Yeah. Get in there. Get the scribe.
I would love to see, you know, and I guess there's no market for it, or it would happen, right? You know, I would love to see a book about early makers and get all this stuff documented. But
Yeah.
anyways, I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, we're taking our best shot at it with History Tapas, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. I wish there was more info. It doesn't appear to be. If anybody knows of info that we're not seeing, or, you know, more than kind of scrounging together a couple of magazine write-ups, we'd love to know a source for that stuff, and would be happy to talk about it on the show. That's why I was happy to talk about, you know, Clay giving us access to the Knife World stuff. That's hugely valuable, right? But you got to go mine for it. It took a bunch of research time to get this stuff together.
But the great thing about this, I think, and the folks in our, you know, Facebook group and stuff like that, is there will be someone, like we said before, that knows this stuff.
Yep.
You know, and I think just bringing it up is important. And so that it might be, you know, probably Cowbird, you know, with his trap mind and all that, you know, iron mind, telling us all the information that he's remembered for the last 50 years. But, you know, someone will be able to give us a story about it, and other people will learn about it and go look at it. And maybe that's enough. I don't know. Maybe it's not, but it's something at least.
Yep.
And that's my soapbox.
There you go. Picture time. So I sent you guys a Cordova Huntsman.
Mm-hmm. What a good looking one.
Pretty
right there.
knife that is.
Yeah, and that's kind of a marbly blade too.
Yeah. Big old giant swedge, you know, stag handles. Very nice.
A little bit on the butt there, like New Mexico art maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. The little
Amber spacer.
yeah, what do you call that piece on the butt end of the handle?
Butt cap.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, a little engraved piece. Maybe Native American style. I like that.
Really pretty knife.
Yeah. What other ones you guys have for Cordova? I got another one. This one's pretty simple, but I thought it was really pretty. A Cordova small game hunter.
Yeah, what the problem is, you go looking for these. I had this problem. I found a Richtig of yours, but it was sold for $3,500.
Yeah.
I was like, woo.
Right.
You know, you start. But then I also saw one of Cordova's, and I was like, $650, but it was sold, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, this little Cordova small game, another one, stag handles, very nice shape, right? Very swoopy style. Some jimping down the blade, which is pretty cool, but way down, right? So this is like a bird and trout kind of thing, I assume. It must be pretty small.
Put your finger out there.
Yeah.
I'd have a hard time looking away from that hunter that you posted with the stag.
That thing's a beauty, isn't it?
Just great lines.
Oh, you sent this picture of the Richtig D-Guard?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. There was a picture of that in someone's hand in one of the articles.
I thought that was pretty sweet.
It is pretty cool. Nice. Tom, you got a Cordova that you went and found we should take a look at?
I posted the one I found that Gladius with the copper plate and the like hammered finish. I really thought that was something special.
Yep. Sean, did you see a Cordova out there that got your attention?
I got one I found.
Oh, that's one of the sets I think Michael was talking about. Yeah, that's awesome.
You notice that he puts a gut hook on the back of his axe.
Oh, yeah.
Look at those shoot knives.
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
So sweet. Oh, yeah. That's a Cordova, Sean? That thing's very...
Found it on his website.
It's very, very Chapel.
That's very Sean. Sean picked the most Sean Cordova you can possibly find.
That's an aorta poker right there. That's very shown.
Mm-hmm. Lots of sweep.
Wow, beautiful knife.
Look how deep that hollow grind is.
Oh yeah,
That's a pretty small wheel he's
Heck
got in
yeah.
there.
That top has to be, what, 3 inches maybe?
Yeah, that was fun to grind, I bet.
Yeesh.
Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
All right, very cool, Joe Cordova.
very.
Well done, Michael, for not being a lot of info.
Yeah.
We had an inside source that you failed to use.
Yeah. Way to go, me.
That's all right. We could always circle back and talk about it. Maybe we'll have Luke back with us and he can talk about it.
Oh, that'd be pretty cool.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Give us another excuse to bring him back. I think
It's been a while.
I think he's down to rejoin us again anyway. So, well, Tom, you want to take the wheel?
Hell yeah.
All right.
So I've got a knife maker I'd like to talk about. Really, someone I really have liked for a long time. I've enjoyed the work, and her name is Carolyn Tinker. So I had a hard time finding a whole lot of anything on her. I went to the Knife World archives and nothing. I reached out to Bird or on our Mark of the Maker group, and Bird came back and he had, of course, a brochure. And so he sent me that, which was a lot of information.
Yeah.
And I knew I'd seen some articles on her. So I started looking through the Gun Digest and, the Knife World and, or Knife Digest and all this stuff. And I found two articles. And then when we were talking before the show, Mark sent me another article that he had found in his research, which was actually a really cool article. I read through it real quick earlier and really kind of gave more of an insight on her. Part of the research I did, I knew she passed away in 1999, and I tried to find some family, or I actually tried to find an obit and try to find some family, and I reached out to another knife maker with the same last name, and they're not related. But anyways, here's what I found. Basically, the first female of knife making. She was the first female guild member, full-time female guild member. She started out in 1964. And at that time, she was actually forging and doing stock removal. What was interesting to me doing this podcast was some of the articles that I read talked about how she was raised and kind of her early years, and it was very similar to many of the people that we've interviewed. She grew up in a city, but she was kind of known as a tomboy. She always had a pocket knife in her pocket, which was very unladylike. Like it said in the article, her father had like 4 acres in the middle of town and grew figs. So she was kind of on a farm inside the town. She was, in the article, it said she was around farms, horses, and farriers and always had a knife. So pretty interesting. She graduated high school in 1949 and became a PE teacher. She taught, I don't know for how many years, but she ended up retiring while she was in Pasadena, California. The article that Mark sent was really cool. It basically says that she worked out of a shop in the back of her house. And in the books, the Gun Digest Book of Knives, the second edition, which was 1973, has the best article I found on her knife making. And it actually shows some pictures of her shop, which was really kind of cool. Had some really cool pictures. And one of the things that I saw, I don't know where I saw it, was she had a very difficult time grinding at first. But when they came back a few years later, that's it. In the Knife Digest, I think it says that her grinding was much improved.
Interesting.
1971, she went to just stock removal. One of the things that I found really interesting, I'm just gonna pull it up and read it. Her favorite steels were D2, D3, 154 cm, and 440C. And this kind of cracks me up because in Knife Digest they have a full page picture of her and one of her knives, and there's like a little 2 or 3 paragraph section, and this made me chuckle, especially at the time, because this would have been 1976, and it says she works in 440C, which we'd like to see her do away with. D2 and D3.
Wow.
But they like straight out called her out, and it's pretty funny because honestly, 440C, if it's heat treated properly, is a pretty good steel, even still today.
Not a far relative from a lot of the modern steels we use, but we like to pretend it's not.
Yeah, it's really not a bad steel. It polishes nice, and it performs well if it's heat treated right. But yeah, that line made me chuckle.
Wow. I'm going to write that about you and D2.
That's right.
Son of a bitch.
Tom does knives in AEBL and D2, which we'd like to see him do away with.
Well, they wanted her to use D2 because right after that it says, D2 and D3. It also says, and if you look at the pictures of her knives, it says right here, her knives are hand comfortable, which means quite a bit to the sportsman. And that was kind of her thing, with small fixed blades.
Yeah.
I really like her style. Like if you look at some of the, like her models, they look like you could pick it up and go, out in the woods and use it. I really like it.
Very user friendly, very utilitarian, but also clean.
Really nice lines too.
Yeah, I picked a real pretty one. I would love to have had.
Yeah, I really like the Model 2 and the Model, I think it's the Model 5s or the number 5. It's like a semi-skinner type knife. But yeah, so her knives, if you get one of her knives, she had a little code. So if you look at the back, her maker's mark was Carolyn D. Tinker, and it said maker, and it said Whittier, California, which I couldn't figure that out because her shop is in Pasadena.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was something that I just couldn't figure out. But on the back, she has a code, and it's pretty cool. There's a number. Her pieces were numbered. And then there's a letter, and the D would stand for D2 or D3. C stood for 154 cm, and S stood for 440C. So I thought that was interesting. Also, it said in all the articles I read that her favorite materials were exotic woods, like the natural materials. Yeah. You could order her knives with micarta, but she preferred these exotic woods, and she searched them out. Another thing I found interesting was, when she started in 1964 in this article in Gun Digest Book of Knives, it said one of the hardest things for her was to find supplies. And I think that's something that we so much take for granted today. There's so many places online, and the access to actual materials is pretty phenomenal. Like I said, there wasn't a whole lot that I found. That's pretty much all I found. I don't know how long she was in the guild because she didn't pass away. She wasn't a member in good standing when she passed away. So basically, she didn't even, unless you're a member in good standing, when you pass away, you don't even get mentioned really by the guild, which I find really sad. So I don't know when she joined the guild. I would guess in the 60s. She went, I guess 74 was her first guild show. So possibly I'm going to guess that's the first time she was in the guild, because I think that's part of membership. You have to go to a guild show.
Yeah, one of the articles I read, it must not have been this one. I must have found something else about her. It talked about that yeah, she was the first woman to join the guild, and I thought they talked about when she did. Huh, maybe not. But yeah, for some reason that 74 time frame is what I remember as well.
Yeah. I thought it was cool. It talked about her, she's a retired PE teacher. When she retired, she went full time. And this article you sent was really cool because it sounds like she had a huge garden in the back, lots of flowers. She did bonsai, which is at that time is pretty crazy to do. And she had 2 Doberman pincers.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it said at some point her house got broken into.
Yeah, so she started keeping a gun.
Yeah, and she put locks all over the place and a couple of Dobermans. She's got it covered with that, I think.
Yeah, that was a really cool article. Gave quite a bit of insight into her as a person.
Yeah.
And had some good pictures of her and some interesting pictures of her shop. Like, it looks like she didn't have a belt grinder that she's actually, and that was in the Gun Digest article also. It looks like she's grinding on like a rubber wheel on a Baldor motor or something.
That's what it looked like to me too. I didn't see a belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think at that time period, so it looks to me like it's about a 12-inch wheel. So I don't know what the circumference of that is. I could probably figure that out, but it's not 72 inches. And the abrasives at that time sucked.
Yeah.
It was basically aluminum oxide. So can you imagine how often she was changing that? And, I wonder why she had a hard time grinding. And her knives are beautiful. If you look at them, they're the ones in her brochure. And, if you search like on Arizona, and I found some on Nordic, I think, and the Cutting Edge that had all been sold. But the photographs are beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, her catalog was really, really nice too.
Yeah. $1.
Yeah, it says... she really liked these natural materials, and she claimed to have one of the finest collections of Brazilian rosewood. Man, if you guys have ever seen really, really nice Brazilian rosewood is stunning. They used to make guitars with Brazilian rosewood, and then it kind of went the way of elephant ivory, where it got extremely hard to get, and then eventually was like a prohibited material because they were pulling this rosewood out of protected areas and stuff, and so it became very, very hard to get. But boy, good Brazilian rosewood is beautiful. It's super swirly, very rich, kind of reddish chocolate color. Gorgeous stuff.
I actually have 2 pieces on my desk right now.
Oh, nice.
And, 2 sets of scales. Basically, I had a customer request it, and I was like, I've never used it. I don't know if I can find it.
Yeah. It's hard.
And I searched, and it was like $150 for a set of scales.
Yeah.
But it is amazingly beautiful.
Yep.
Can't wait to use it. But yeah, interesting lady. First lady of knife maker, just not a lot of information out there. I actually found more than I thought I would, but especially on the initial look, I couldn't find anything.
I remember you said who you were going to do, and then you're like, dude, I can't find jack on this lady.
Nothing. And I knew I'm pretty sure there's a Knife magazine article. I remember reading about it, and I want to say it was like, it wasn't Blade. It was another knife magazine from like the late 80s, and it had a bunch of survival knives like Lyle and all that. And it had an article on her, I think, but I couldn't find the magazine. So,
and that's a big piece of ironwood.
Yeah, just sent you guys a picture of her holding a big old chunk. So she went to her first Knife Makers Guild show in 1974.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. That had to be like a little eye opener for the guild, right?
Yeah.
Have a lady show up to join the guild?
Yeah, I'm trying to. How did you come across her? When did she make an appearance in your, custom knife world, I guess, Tom?
You're talking about me?
Yeah.
I like I said, I read about her, I want to say in a magazine, and it may have been this Gun Digest book, but I think it was a magazine from the late 80s.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of that too, and I know that I've read her and see she's been in my little mind before, because I used to confuse her with Tinker Pierce, the sword maker from back in the day.
That's who I reached out to.
Okay.
I think. Let's see.
Yeah, and she has a little bit of a coverage in that same book, the second edition. That's what I sent that picture from.
Yeah, that's where I got most of my information. That was the only, one of the only places. And if you look at the next page, those 4 knives are freaking amazing. I love those. You know, there's like a timeless feel and look. The grinds look great. They're deep hollows, and there's no sharp edges anywhere on these knives.
No, that first little Skinner up top is a workhorse.
Oh, yeah, dude. Her knives are beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wish there was more information and more pictures of her knives out there.
Yeah, no, she has some cool stuff. That's a great pick. I mean, that kind of epitomizes what this is about, I think.
Yeah. Great example of what we're trying to do with this kind of episode, right? Yeah, so she got her degree from Whittier College, and Whittier College, they have a magazine that they put out at Whittier that, at least at the time, it's still called The Rock, and it was put out quarterly back in this 1978 time frame, and that's when this the article I sent Tom, that's when that article was published. And it was pretty cool because they were basically showcasing an alum, right? Saying, hey, here's a lady that went to Whittier and kind of what she's doing. She apparently graduated from Whittier College in 1949. So maybe that's why she marked the knives Whittier, Tom, because that's where she went to school and, right, it's nearby. I don't know.
She passed away in 1999 in Whittier, California.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I didn't Google search those on a map. Let's actually do that just out of curiosity.
30 some miles.
Okay, you already look. Yeah. Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. I mean, it'd take like 4 hours in today's LA traffic, but
you get that stamp made though. You don't want to, get another one.
That's true.
So we picked out some knives. So I went and found a couple Carolyn Tinker knives that I thought were really nice, very slick. So I just sent you one of them. This is a little boot knife.
You son of a bitch.
You found this one too?
Yeah.
That was my pick too. I was like, that's a gorgeous little blade.
Was that a little, what are the Sig and Dub, or I don't know how you say that.
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm pretty sure I slaughtered it.
It's like a little Loveless and a little bit of your Scottish Dub.
You're not even going to try? Scottish sock knife.
Funny. These are from the Gun Digest pictures, Tom? Is that what these are that you're sending us? Oh, yeah.
That's what they are. That last picture is that Skinner that Michael was talking about.
Oh, look at that thing.
The big old gut hook? Or am I
looking
at the wrong one?
No, next one.
Yeah, the one with the burl.
Oh, with the burl. Yeah, I saw either that knife or another one like it with that very heavy burl handle. How pretty is that?
It's like a shorty nest muck that, you can just kind of skin them out anything you need it to.
She was known for smaller fixed blades. I like that. That's kind of my niche also.
You could tell she really liked these woods because that kind of bird's eye is hard to find.
Yeah.
Bird's eye maple like that.
You kind of wonder if that was part of the important part to her.
Well, yeah.
Was finding and doing the wood part.
Yeah.
Well, it says most definitely that was like her thing. She haunted these places, I think is what it said.
Yeah. Yeah. In the Whittier College article, that's what they talked about, was she just was bonkers for finding these nice handle materials. And that she wasn't much of a conversationalist, but once she got her started talking about her knives or specifically about handles, she was...
or bonsai or...
that
flowers or something,
fits in, having a big, garden or flower or what, all that kind of fits.
Yeah, there's another one. Let me find it here.
On that bottom picture with the Skinner, I actually like the bottom knife in that. I actually like all 4 of those knives really well. They look great. But that bottom knife with that kind of upswept point, it's weird. That reminds me of my bird and trout a lot.
Yeah. I think you and I are thinking of the same pattern, Tom. I just sent a picture that That's from her
That's it.
catalog.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, the number 4 Skinner with the high point. She called it High Point Skinner. Boy, is that a pretty knife. I just love that shape.
The one without the guard, though, really, if you took a little bit of that upsweep out, that really reminds me of my burden trout, my TK11 burden trout.
Carolyn went to the future and traced you and went back.
Probably the other way around.
I didn't want to say that out loud.
I mean, we all get inspiration. I mean, I know I've seen this knife in the past. I don't know. I didn't see it when I drew my burden trout, but.
Oh, sure you didn't, pal.
Yeah.
Inspiration.
Yep.
I didn't know I could say air quotes, but I just did.
You did. Yeah.
I heard it.
Yeah. If you poke around, you can find her catalog. It's really, really nicely done. And that's where I screenshot that picture from, was some scans of her catalog. I don't know exactly what year, but really, really cool.
1974.
Is that what it
I
is?
think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Because I think, so when you used to want to join the guild, you had to have a brochure and you had to go to the guild show.
Ah, okay.
And so I'm pretty sure somewhere I've got that is from 74.
Okay. That's a cool little guy too, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Another little Skinner.
Yeah, she had great lines. The lines of her knives flowed really well. That, you know, I see makers today that don't understand that flowing lines. I mean, there was makers then too, I'm sure, but she got it.
Well, I mean, it doesn't say much about her, you know, being a big hunter or stuff, but you can tell these were pretty purpose-driven.
Yeah.
I mean, she seemed to know how to skin stuff, or at least know the lines needed to skin and butcher. And,
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Versed in theory at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, back in the 30s and 40s, I mean,
yeah,
you just about had to, right? I mean, know how to field dress stuff. You couldn't go to I guess you could probably go to a butcher, but I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know.
Get the butcher
Very
looking
cool
down his
maker.
nose at you.
Yeah, right. So that's what I got.
Yeah, very nice. I like the way they wrapped up this, like you said, this maybe more insight into stuff about Carolyn Tinker herself, right, in this Whittier College write-up. But the last paragraph is really nice. It says, students, flowers, knives, and dogs, Carolyn D. Tinker loves them all, deriving satisfaction from inquiring minds, pleasant scents, shapes which fit the hand almost sensually, and the touch of well-cured wood, or the boundless energy of a healthy animal. I like that.
That's well said.
Yeah,
It's actually a really good article.
it is. I'm glad I found it for you, Tom.
Appreciate it.
It was a good one.
Well, I mean, you searched way down the list on that because I went at least a page plus, and it was like not about her, and I gave up. But
Yeah,
you did not.
I don't know how I got to it, but it was like Google search page 16 or something, and bang, I'm like, whoa.
That's crazy.
Pretty obscure location though, right? A 1978 second quarter back issue of a college magazine.
Props to them for putting it online.
Heck yeah.
Were you in dark web?
The dark web. Yeah.
I forgot to look there.
I went to the deepest depths of the internet. All right. Well, super cool. Well done, Tom, on Carolyn Tinker. Very nice little tribute. And like we said all along in this episode, since we're kind of through the makers here, we'll share the pictures that we came up with, right? Because we all sort of grabbed pictures for each other's makers, some knives that we really liked from them. We'll share links to these articles and stuff. And if any of you have knowledge, information, an article that we didn't see or otherwise, please don't be shy. We are usually, I don't have to say that out loud. Our listeners are usually really good about coming forward in our Facebook group and saying, hey, I know about that. So if you got a story or an article or whatever, please let us know. We'd love to know more ourselves. And you never know, maybe we'll work it into a future conversation somehow.
Oh yeah,
That'd be
man.
cool.
The hive mind's got to know more than, handful of idiots here.
Yeah, for sure.
Hive mind. I like that.
Yep. Yeah, and we're gonna figure out how to get KL Burr to join us and deep dive a topic with us or two. I think that could be fun.
You think the knowledge would just come out like a hose, like a fire hose? And
I think
like and just
it might. That's why I think we need to pick a couple of specific things and have him take us on a little journey.
yeah, like a laser focus that he can still spend 5 hours on with his vast knowledge.
Yeah. That'll be like instead of history tapas, that'll be the bird smorgasbord. All you can eat, baby.
Mm-hmm.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed this one. Kind of a mixture of history. Yeah, this was fun. I liked it, and we'll do more of this. We're gonna have to find. It's not hard to find some more makers. We have other ideas as well, and we'll do some more research and swing back and talk through some. I think we got a couple of guests that are gonna help us out with some history stuff too, which would be really, really cool. Regional history in some cases, which would be neat.
And if you are super bored and want to like put this stuff out there, like document it online,
Yeah.
that'd be awesome.
We would appreciate you if you just go off and write this stuff down somewhere, maybe make a book or big old website or something else. All right. I appreciate your optimism on that request, Tom.
Right?
Yeah. Well, that's it. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account, at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram, at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram, at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.